We're excited to announce the first ever, first of its kind higher education podcast conference brought to you by Edu Alliance, the EdUp Experience, and Podium. This is happening Saturday, July 12th at the University of Illinois Chicago campus. This is an in-person event, one day only, the first of its kind. This is for people working in and around higher education who are interested in starting a podcast, who may have a podcast, want to learn more about podcasting. So if you want to be there, please go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn how you can get your early bird registration, see who the keynote will be, and how you can submit proposals to be a part of this amazing inaugural conference. So that again, go to higheredpodcon.com to learn more. Do you want to get invites to special events? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes episodes, and original content? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Well, you can go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.
Welcome to the EdUp Experience College Closure Podcast through the eyes of. Today we are looking at college closure through the eyes of two former students. Nathan Stroop and Christine Dillman were students at St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, Indiana, when that college closed. Some of my listeners might recognize the college. I was fortunate to speak to Jonathan Nichols, a professor, and now I'm going to be able to share the stories of what it was like to be a student at the time that St. Joseph's closed. I am your host, Dr. Jay Keene, and according to records, there's been about 118 colleges that have closed or merged since 2016. That number is probably a little higher, and predictive analysts are talking about hundreds more closing in the next 5 years. I worked for one of those 118 colleges. Why do colleges close? There could be many reasons. Some are more obvious than others, but some of it is just simple lack of funds, declining enrollments, reduction in state funding, the low perception of the value of higher education. Colleges are fighting their reputations, accreditation issues, and sometimes it's just, unfortunately, gross and significant mismanagement on the part of senior leadership. But what often gets lost in the drastic outcome is the human trauma that becomes a byproduct. This podcast series has been examining the human side, the human story of college closures. And today, like I said, we are doing it through the students at St. Joseph College. As stated, today I am talking with Nathan Stroop and Christine Dillman. Nathan, Christine, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So let's just jump in. We'll say Nathan first. Christine, you can back him up, and then we'll bounce it back and forth between the two of you. Mm-hmm. But jump in on, tell us where you were in your program at that time. How did you find out? Was there any red flags? Some colleges, the students are hearing it through the grapevine. Some students are more informed, and some of them don't know anything until an announcement is made. Mm-hmm. So, Nathan, why don't you start jumping? Tell us about the moment when you found out.
Yeah, so I would have been a sophomore when I guess everything started coming to play with St. Joe, and we knew about the financial issues. I can vividly remember we received an email. It would have been in late January or February, perhaps. Christine, I guess you can provide a little bit of clarity on that. But we received an email, nevertheless, in the evening. We were just about to walk to dinner, and it outlined that the college was experiencing some financial issues, and ultimately, it was a very similar response, PR response from a college that you would expect. The Board of Trustees is committed to the completion of our education, and that ultimately they would be meeting over the coming weeks to discuss a plan going forward. So I guess the initial email I remember, again, was before dinner, and then a couple of weeks later, we knew we would hear about the result again after dinner one evening. I think it was about 7 o'clock. The whole college gathered in the auditorium.
Yeah, so like Dr. J was saying, my name is Christine. I would have been one of the members of the class of 2018. So I was a junior when all this was happening. And Nathan, you're right. I guess it was probably around maybe 2 weeks, a week and a half before anything happened. But that's when we initially got the email about the financial issues. And I even remember in the fall they had their big telethon, St. Joseph's College, and that was always a thing. They always had their telethon every year, and they didn't really seem too confident, I guess you could say, with the number. They weren't discouraged by it, but they weren't happy about it from my understanding of it. So when we initially got that email, I don't think I had a reaction when it came out. I thought it was just one of those protocols like, hey, if you're hearing some rumblings, just want to let you know that this is the current situation and this is what we're going to do going forward. So I didn't really think about it initially.
So at that time, you thought, okay, it's not going to happen so soon. You at that moment you thought, yeah, there's financial struggles. We're not closing it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I didn't think it was initially going to lead to a closure. I thought that it would lead to precautions more, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah, but can you both give us a couple of sentences? And perhaps I should have said this at the beginning. Take a step back. Tell us a little bit more about St. Joe's, because what I understand, it was a small not-for-profit, but it was also like a very warm, family kind of oriented place. People there was a social environment beyond just the academics. Is that the sense? Is that true?
That's
Mm-hmm.
100% correct.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a small town that has this college in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, Division II program for athletics. And we're kind of right smack dam in the middle between West Lafayette, which is where Purdue is, and then the other side where Maryville is right by there, the next big city. So it was very much a place where you wouldn't expect to form as many friendships as you did, let alone a second family in that sense. But yeah, it felt like everybody knew pretty much who everybody was. You wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
go around the campus without saying hi to someone or at least sharing a smile with them. It really was kind of that community atmosphere, a very warm Midwestern welcome, I guess you could say.
And so does that make it harder? Meaning, like, some people go to college, they go, let me take my classes and leave, and they don't build that kind of connection to the college. They don't
Mm-hmm.
feel that they belong. But when you're there and you have this family oriented place, the social environment is tight knit, and then all of a sudden this event happens, did it make it harder? Or let me throw out the other side, or did it make it easier because you had a stronger support system because everyone was going through it?
I think that kind of went in both ways there.
Mm-hmm.
So it made it easier because, yes, we were all going through it, but it did make it harder in a way, especially coming from my perspective, being a junior in that situation, having one more year left. I,
Right.
I kind of was in like a no man's land for
Mm-hmm.
that entire rest of my junior year because I didn't know what was going to happen going forward or how long it would take for me to finish my degree and then eventually move on into my career. So, in a way, it was harder, but it was easier knowing that there was a whole bunch of people, whether it was students, faculty, staff, kind of going through the same questions the same time I was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What about you,
And I
Nathan?
think yeah, to piggyback off that, so yes, we were all, for lack of better terms, mutual suffering through it all at the
Hmm.
time. But as cliche as it is, and every small liberal arts college wants to say, they're a family atmosphere, but I know for me personally, that was one of the huge draws of St. Joe's, is just, how much of a family environment it felt like. And to see everyone mutually suffering at that point, it made it difficult, from seeing the priest who devoted their entire life to the mission
Mm,
of the college, to the faculty staff who, it's not a surprise objectively could have pursued options elsewhere, but they were committed deeply to the mission of the institution. And just seeing everyone suffer at the time, it was really heart-wrenching. coupling that with our own loss and our own struggle of trying to figure out where we were going next.
And I would say too, with the professors there, that they were hanging on to the students. They didn't want to let us down, essentially. So
Right.
to go off of your point, Nathan, it was kind of like the school kept you there, and it just made it harder to leave it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people in a lot of different places, that the faculty hold on, right? So even if there's struggles, you see some administrators, some lower level staff, they'll leave, but the faculty really care about the students, so they hold on until the very last moment, even if it's a detriment to their own personal career, their own desires. Let me go back to the red flags. So I asked you if you saw anything and what have you, but what about after you were told? Did you, like, for both of you, did you start thinking back and saying, like, once you realize, okay, this is happening, we're closing, did you start thinking back and go, oh, that might have been a red flag. Oh, some of the resources may have not been the same as the previous year or what have you. Were there red flags in hindsight?
I'll jump in here. So I will say, I think one of the most clear red flags in hindsight, and again, it's very common with every institution that is closing or, having financial issues, is just deferred maintenance. So, you look on almost every facility on campus and there was some form of deferred maintenance, even in the chapel, objectively the crown jewel of campus, there was issues with the maintenance of it. To other areas on campus. Again, just deferred maintenance is probably the biggest. We even had a building. We had a building on campus that I know had not been used in almost 20 years by that point, and the college just was unable to tear it down. So again, just all this deferred maintenance adding up.
And I would say maybe for my situation, I think it was kind of, I don't want to say I had glossy eyes through it, but I think I kind of did, just because. So I came to St. Joseph's with my twin sister, so it was the two of us going there together.
Wow.
And yeah, and before St. Joe announced that they were closing, I've already been through numerous school closings in my life. So my first grade school closed when I was in third grade, had to finish, my elementary education somewhere else. I did finish my high school where I graduated at Queen of Peace in Burbank, Illinois. But the week before St. Joe announced that they were closing, Queen of Peace announced that they were closing. So there goes my alma mater that was just kind of ripped out from underneath us. And there were, as far as my understanding when it came to the high school closing, there was no initial signs of that even being possible. The numbers were way up. The teachers and faculty there, they were all expanding their programs. They were getting really excited again about the school itself. So that was kind of a shock to see that with one of the highest enrollment years they've ever had in a while, all of a sudden it closed just 3 short years after I graduated from there. So that was pretty shocking. And then when St. Joe came around and all those rumblings, I guess I kind of was glossy eyed to the whole thing, and I didn't really pay attention to the initial signs. With the deferred maintenance, I didn't really see anything like eye glaring to me that needed to be done. I remember there was this one eyesore on campus, and Nathan, you can attest to it. It was right by the grotto, and it was just a whole bunch of junk there. And maybe they should have put a wall in front of it or something, but there was nothing like off the top of my head that I saw that needed immediate repairs.
It's interesting. So you said your grade school and your high school both closed, your high school after you left. And I imagine they're both in the same geographic area.
You know what? So the high school was actually, it's about 20-30 minutes away from where I grew up, which is where I went to grade school. So the high school was in like the south side of Chicago, technically, and then the western suburbs is where my grade school is still today.
So I was wondering if it might have been more like demographics. First the grade school closes, that's usually a feeder to the high school. So then the high school closes, but I guess given that they're not really geographically similar, maybe that's not the case. However,
not really, just because my high school is also a single gender school. I went to an all female high school, so that could have been part of it, but again, the enrollment numbers were really high the years after I left, so it kind of came out of nowhere. And essentially, I think it was what the nuns that ran the high school, what they wanted to fund, and I don't think essentially Queen of Peace was in that vision for them. I don't know, because again, I wasn't in the school at the
Right.
time, but that's my guess anyway.
Right. And when your grade school closed, like, you probably weren't in control of the decisions made for where you go next.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely not. That was that was
right.
my parents. I was in third
Right.
grade. I mean, at
Right.
the time, my dad was the school board president.
Oh, wow.
And he was, I don't know, again, I don't know the meanings and everything what went on, because I was
Right.
only 9, 10 years old at the time. So
Right.
whatever happened or whatever was going on, that was between, my parents and any other
Of course.
adult around me. Yeah.
Right. Of course, you didn't have that option of saying, "Oh, well, my school closed. I'm just going to hang out for a few months and just chill." Obviously they were putting you somewhere else. But what happened when St. Joe's closed? And answer me this: I'm not exactly sure. It did close in between semesters, right? It didn't shut down in the middle. You did get credits for the final semester that you were there.
We did. Yeah, we did. So when I heard about St. Joseph's closing, I actually wasn't on campus. And I think I'm one of the few students that can say that I wasn't on campus. So it was me and my sister and a couple of our friends. We went back to Illinois for the weekend. It was the Super Bowl weekend. And my dad always throws those big Super Bowl parties. So I said, okay, who wants to go back to Illinois for the weekend just to go hang out and do Super Bowl stuff? So that's what we did. So the night when we got there, I want to say it was about a couple of hours after the fact. That's when we hopped on Facebook Live or whatever the media was at that point to listen
Right.
to the announcement, and that's where we heard it. We were in my dad's kitchen just watching the video. But again, we are probably one of the only few students that weren't on campus at the time.
And Nathan, what about you? Like, what was your next steps?
In terms of like actually hearing the announcement itself, so I guess to contrast with Christine, I was on campus for that. And again, we knew the meeting was happening that evening, and I remember, I mean, the vast majority of the school was in the central auditorium at the time. And I just remember being in there again with most of your classmates, faculty, staff, administration, and just ultimately hearing it. And then just obviously the shock from everyone in the auditorium, and then just,
Right.
leaving there and dealing with that.
When you were in that auditorium and you knew that there was going to be an announcement, did you know that that announcement was closure?
I did not project closure. Again,
so you
maybe
really were shocked.
Yeah, maybe that was being naive. I mean, we knew the board was meeting, but again, we kept hearing, rumbles that the board was doing everything in their power. We projected a merger with another institution, or a downscaling of academic programming. I remember my friends and I were discussing that, but I don't think any of us projected an outright closure.
Right. So I'm sure they're sitting there, you, your friends, the auditorium, people who are listening on Facebook Live or whichever technology, was going, what about us? What do we do? What do the students do? And you say that you projected a merger. That would have at least probably answered some questions. Okay, well, we're now going to be part of a new college. At least we don't have to reapply or what have you. That didn't happen. So was there support from the college to help you transfer? Did you have to pick your own college? What was the next steps academically for you guys?
So I know we were fortunate. There was a variety of college fairs that happened after it. I want to say we had two major ones, and then individual colleges came for visits as well. So it was kind of an eerie experience having a college fair at a college. That was closing. It was just a unique time, I guess, for everyone. And then the college had different transfer agreements as well of institutions who were willing to accept our credits and match, pretty similar financial aid.
Right.
For most students. I believe the institution I transferred to was a partnering institution. There was a couple of us who went down there, but I mean, there was one school who had about half of the student body transferred too. So yeah, we did definitely have institutional support, and I mean, I can remember numerous conversations with faculty, staff, the priest and brothers of the college who were meeting with us personally to discuss, each of our unique situations at the time, which again, like I can't express how much that meant to all of us at the time.
So
I think oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'll get to you, Christine. But so they offered some partnerships for teach out with another school.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, you were able to smoothly go to that school. You didn't have to reapply, right? They just took the St. Joe students
Mm-hmm.
and they sent over the transcripts and the other plans that you may had,
Mm-hmm.
and you were able to continue your degree plan. But if you had chosen one of the ones that they didn't have a partnership, you were on your own to apply and get a transfer and what have you.
I think you were on your own, but I mean, the Office of the Registrar did as much as they could to help assist students during the time. There was initially, the idea of like transcript fees, that was
Right.
eventually waived, as you can imagine.
Yes.
So they really, I can't stress enough between, the Dean of Students, between Registrar, Academic Affairs, everyone really tried to support students, even if you did not pick a teach out partner.
I think
Right.
it's kind of the whole last semester was just kind of, it was a surreal time for everyone, I think. And I just remember watching the Facebook Live video. I just remember hearing a lot of screams, a lot of people just shouting out questions and them not answering those questions. I believe we didn't have that meeting until that Monday or Tuesday, the next week. And I remember being in that meeting all night long with all the students, faculty, staff. I think that was if I'm not mistaken, Nathan, I think that was about a 5-hour meeting that night, just when we were trying to get those questions answered. And I always said, and this is what my sister and I say too, to this day, it was probably easier for the freshmen, especially, and the sophomores to go to a different institution. For the freshmen, it would just be like they're starting all over again. They may lose a year, they may have kept all their credits. It all depended on where they went, but they definitely had the easier situation,
Right.
as opposed to the juniors and where we were. So what they did for the juniors, they gave the juniors the option to kind of accelerate their graduation. Excuse me, and do like an accelerated core program. That's what we called it at St. Joseph's College. So I want to say there was about 20 or so juniors that did take that opportunity to do the accelerated course programs, and they were just piled on with different classes and different courses for the last 3 months or so of the year. One of my very good friends, and Nate knows her too, she was a part of that program, and my goodness, I've never seen so many people stressed out about that just because they have
Wow.
all this extra coursework to do. When it came to me and my sister, we did not do the accelerated program.
The
And we didn't, I'm sorry,
I
go
was just
ahead.
going to, I was going to ask you, the accelerated program meant that they were able to graduate with a diploma from St. Joe's.
Correct.
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more. Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content? That's right, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and subscribe today.
Correct. They
Right.
would be graduating with the class of 2017 as opposed to graduating in 2018.
All right. And so
Um,
you and your sister didn't do that.
We did not do that. So all the schools that they were offering for teach out programs, unfortunately, for what she was studying for and what I was studying for, it wasn't going to work. She's now a doctor. She is a veterinarian in Naperville, and so there weren't too many programs that allowed that specialized department when it came to biology and research and that stuff. And for me, I wanted to have a program where I still had accesses to a radio station, some sort of a TV program for my degree. And a
Right.
lot of those colleges that were a part of the teach out schools just didn't work for what we were going for. So
Right.
we did have to apply to schools, whether it was in Illinois or Indiana. We kind of basically started the process all over again. And we were lucky enough where we ended up graduating from, they did accept all of all of our
Good.
courses for the most part. Um, and again, it's all kind of like a blur. I think I applied to, I don't know, maybe about 5 or 6 schools. And no matter if it was a teach out program or not, I agree with what Nathan said, where the professors, the rest of the faculty and staff, they did whatever they could to support us. And we did whatever we could to support them because we knew that we were going to be moving on to a different institution. We were going to be able to graduate, whether it was on time or not. And the professors and the rest of the faculty, they didn't have any direction, you could
Right.
say. They didn't really have time to find a new position. So we were, I think, by when it's all said and done, we were more concerned about what our professors were going to do than our own situation.
Yeah, because they a couple of things. Well, first off, it is a challenge, right? To be in a school where you're in a specific major, and now you have that school doesn't exist anymore, and you have to leave it, and that major wasn't a popular major, so many other schools might not have it. So that's a challenge. You have to start over. Where I came from, there was a maternal child health program, one of the very few in the country, the only one that offered online options. And so, now you have all these people who have all these credits in a program that doesn't exist anywhere. And so it is a challenge. So I'm happy to hear that you found some place that did take all your credits. I'm sure that probably was helpful for you. But you're right about the faculty. You know, the students, whether they are getting help the from the school or not, whether there's a teach out plan or a partnership, or they're doing it on their own, eventually they do find their path.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Faculty may take a lot longer to find another job somewhere. There's only a limited amount of jobs. With so many closures, those jobs are dwindling, and they may not be prepared to do that. They may not be ready to go back into a job search or have their resume ready or what have you. There are a couple of schools, very few, that have closed, but in the partnerships and in the transitions, right? They talk to the new or receiving college not only about taking their students, but helping out the faculty. That's great, but also rare.
And that did happen with St. Joe. I will say there were a lot of
Okay.
professors that went on to the one teach out school that Nathan was
Mm-hmm.
talking about. They did accept a lot of the professors after the closure. Now they had to go through a normal interviewing process naturally. And one of my professors interviewed for that teach out school, and he just didn't like it. He didn't like
Right.
the vibe or the atmosphere. He said it just wasn't the same and he couldn't do it. Like he just couldn't go to that institution. And eventually he did go on to a different institution that was outside of Indiana. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, his initial thoughts when he went to the first teach out school was just not a good feeling for him.
Well, and again, because you're coming from a place that had a culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you were
Hmm.
just a faculty member who said, "All right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to teach my class, and I'm going to go home and have dinner," and they don't care. But when you develop and create a culture that of caring from faculty to student, from a social life where there's more than just the academics, but hey, what's going on in your life? Hey, what's there? The support. Then it's hard to find another place like that. So we're talking about your stories, but the faculty themselves, they may find that go to another place and find a job, but not like it because they're not having that same culture that they so craved and went to a specific college for. So it is challenging. So tell us after. So now,
Mhm.
you did find places to go. You graduated. Were there longer term effects? Did you have trouble with your transcripts afterwards? Where are you professionally to the extent that you're able to share, you want to share? Um, you know, Talk about how it affected your personal life longer term.
if anything, it started a good conversation and an icebreaker with
Oh,
people,
okay.
because Nathan could probably agree with that
Hmm.
too. It
Hmm.
just starts a conversation, and it stirs up a lot of questions. I think there's still questions within St. Joe's, with the last, students that were there. There were a lot of questions remaining. But as I've, grown up, like, I graduated on time, thankfully, with my twin sister in 2018 at our new institution. And she took a year off, and then she eventually went on to the University of Illinois Champaign to finish out her dream to be a veterinarian and get her doctorate. So now she's been happily a doctor for 2 years now, and she's very
Nice.
successful, very happy for her. And then for me, I kind of left Illinois. That's where I grew up and lived. So I kind of left right after I graduated college and moved to South Dakota. That was
Mhm.
within a month of graduating, and I started my career at a local NBC station in TV in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And then after a little bit over a year into TV, I found this radio opportunity in town, and it was for a morning show. And in radio nowadays, that's pretty hard to come by, a morning drive time, coveted position like that.
Right.
And I was happy to take it. It was an easy decision for me, and I wasn't even looking. So I've been doing that now. It's going to be 6 years this July, and
Nice.
I just got married last year. So it's been,
Congratulations.
thank you. It's been kind of a whirlwind since the school has closed, but every time I bring it up, whether it's my coworkers or friends that I have met outside of St. Joe's, I always get those weird looks like, wait, what? Your college closed? Like, what do you mean that doesn't happen? And I
Yeah.
said, no, it
Mhm.
doesn't happen. But it's a good conversation piece to say, well, this is what happened. Or when someone asks me, where'd I go to school? And I always say, I love that question
Right.
because it's kind of an interesting storyline. But yeah, it hasn't hindered me in any way, per se. It's only started interesting conversations.
Well, and that's good, right? I mean, it's good to have those conversations.
Hmm.
When I was telling someone, "Oh, I'm going to start podcasting about the human side of college closure," well, they're like, "Well, how many people you don't be able to get?" I mean, like, and I'm like, "No, actually, unfortunately, it's becoming more and more common that colleges are closing, and you're right, it is an interesting, icebreaker to have that
Yeah.
conversation, and that's why I'm
Even
here. That's good.
Exactly. Even I shared my own story of the school closing a little bit during my radio show, because there was another school here in South Dakota that was closing. I believe it was last year, 2 years ago. It was called Presentation College
Yeah.
that shut their
Hmm.
doors. So I ended up having an interesting, segment about that.
I'm actually on my future podcast. I'll be talking to the former president or the president at the time of the closing at
Hmm.
Presentation College. So stay tuned for that. Nathan,
Yeah.
how did like this all affect your personal life? You talked about like the anxieties at the time. Not sure
Hmm.
what was happening. Any kind of personal things that you want to share without getting too personal that you don't want to share.
Yeah, so I just remember that last semester, like I think a lot of my classmates, it was very difficult to, I think, really focus on your classes at the time.
Hmm.
Again, faculty, staff did everything they could to support us, but naturally there was a lot of anxiety from that. As mentioned before, I was a sophomore, so I think in a lot of regards I was a lot more fortunate time-wise. I like to think of it as, St. Joe was almost a junior college for me, and then I transferred on to a different institution.
Okay.
So again, that was very fortunate. I mean, not that there's a good time for it to happen when your school closes, but objectively, I think
Right.
sophomore year is kind of a good time. But ultimately, the school I transferred into, it was one of our teach out partners. It was another smaller Roman Catholic school. And to me, that was important, and I found a sense of community there. But it took a little bit of time. St. Joe, the reality was it was just a larger institution than where I transferred to. So it was a little bit difficult just, finding friends your junior year. And
Yeah.
again, no discredit whatsoever to the institution I transferred to. It's just kind of the reality of, being
Right.
older when you're transferring in compared to perhaps the other new students on campus.
Yeah,
Um,
and those students, like you say, it's probably a smaller environment, but
Mhm.
probably, for lack of better terms, already had their cliques, already had their peer groups. So you don't have to come in and try to invade it and become part of them, and that made
Mhm.
it probably made it harder.
Most definitely. I was fortunate. My roommate I had, he was transferring in from a junior college in Illinois. So it helped that both him and I were kind of
Ah,
new to the institution at the time.
mhm.
And then he was an athlete. So, I was able to meet all of his friends and all of his teammates. And, it really helped with bonding there.
So you were
Um,
on the same playing field, so to
Yes,
say,
yes,
at
very
the same
much
time.
so.
Awesome.
And then similar to Christine, so I was able to finish on time.
Hmm.
I did though a little bit different. I did end up switching my major. The institution I ended up transferring to, my interests were really changing by the time I was becoming a junior, and frankly, the institution I went to, what I ended up majoring in was a better fit long term. So I ended up switching my major, and again, still graduated. It would have been in May of 2019. I then ended up going on to business school where I studied nonprofit administration, since nonprofits and fundraising and everything really became an interest to me after St. Joe.
Right.
That was one thing where the institution I did end up finishing at was small enough. I was able to work in their development office,
Hmm.
because that was a major interest. After everything we had from St. Joe, just wondering, how does an institution work? What does fundraising look like? I think lots of questions that we had as students at that time. So again, ended up going on for my master's degree in business, graduated from that. I ended up or I still work in higher education, and then I am
Right.
currently pursuing a doctorate as well in higher education. So I mention all that as just, really my entire career trajectory came about because of the experience at St. Joe. I
Right.
can't stress enough how fortunate I am. Many, many, many of my classmates did not land as well as I did. But myself, this
Mm.
became such a deep-rooted interest of mine, and it's really what I've devoted my effort and energy towards.
Right. And
It's
it
funny
sounds
that
like
you said, oh, I'm sorry.
no. I was just going to say, it sounds like you took your situation and used it for the benefit for yourself. I mean, you sometimes you hear stories. Someone became a family marriage therapist after his parents got divorced or something like that. They took a situation and created it for themselves for the better. Go ahead, Christine.
I was gonna say, Nathan, it's funny that you brought up, integrating into your new university because I didn't
Mhm.
even think about that aspect until you brought it up. I was lucky enough where I had my sister with me, and then we shared a room with two other girls that transferred in, and then right across the hall from our dorm were another set of St. Joseph's students that transferred in. So we kind of had our own little like transfer corner, I guess you can call it. But yeah, I it was harder, I would think, for juniors too, but coming in your senior year and your cliques are really already formed up. Yeah, that was a kind of an interesting thing to go through, walking into the cafeteria by yourself and then sitting there by yourself because you don't know anybody. So it was kind of just it was a surreal thing. I definitely ate in my dorm room a lot during the first couple of weeks, but as the year went on and as I got to get it, as I integrated into more programs like for TV and for sports broadcasting, I got to know the teams really well. And I got to travel with a bunch of the teams too. So it made that transition easier to get to know people. And I think Katie and I, when it's all said and done, we are lucky that we ended up. Um, with the group of people that we still know and we still talk with today. And I always say things happen for a reason. And probably, this is just the weird part of the journey that I just happen to have three schools closed. And this is where I am today. And I don't think I regret any second of it.
It sounds like a good start for a memoir.
You know what? Yeah, probably. And yeah, it's kind of even, I before we got married, the first time I ever went back to St. Joe, it was, oh geez, I forget what weekend I was in town for, but I ended up saying, "Hey, let's just drive to St. Joe because I haven't been there in gosh knows how long, and I have
Right.
never showed you that campus. I showed him my campus where I graduated from, and I really didn't have to explain much because I wasn't there long enough to say, "Oh, this is where we did X, Y, or Z,
Right.
and this is where this happened." When I took him to Rensselaer. It was only about an hour and a half from where I grew up. So we drove out there, and just all of a sudden, these memories started flooding back. Like I was telling him, this is where I started being in radio, was at WPUN the Joe, or this is where my first dorm was. I had this class here, I had that class there. So it was just kind of surreal how the memories just flooded back. And then meeting up with some of my old professors at the wagon wheel. Nate would know what that is too. I That was the first time I had cried since I've been on that campus, because aside
Wow.
from, my sister and a couple of other friends that I know through St. Joe, that was my first time seeing people from the college that I haven't seen in gosh knows how long. So it brought back a lot of emotions, and I'm glad that I was able to show my husband where it all started for me and who got me to where I am in my career today. I do credit, my university that I ended up transferring to get me through the door and through the finish line. But the inspiration and who I am today as a disc jockey, or out on TV, or on courtside for basketball games now for a G League here in town, I credit all of that to the people at St. Joe. I really do.
Well, I'm really happy because the college itself, St. Joe's, sounds like when it was going and when you were there, it made an impact. The
Mhm.
fact that it closed, not happy, not in an emotional time, yet that itself, that event made an impact on both of you. Then you
Mhm.
had to go to a new school, and it sounds like both of you were able to adjust. Nathan, you were put together with someone who was at an equal playing field because they're transferring from a junior college. That you're both starting your third year, but your first year at a new college, right? Christine, you found your group and were able to figure out how to do that last year in good social terms as well. And then you were both impacted by the new college to then go ahead and advance. Christine, you talk about how it impacted you professionally and what you talk about now on your shows. And Nathan, you're picking a career simply because of the way these events had a place in your life. Anything else you guys want to share before we finish up?
I think I can say is, no matter how many times we talk about St. Joe closing, no one really knows the answer. There's so many
Mhm.
different theories and
Yeah.
so many what if questions. We're never going to actually know, because only a
Right.
handful of us were in those meetings that made the decision. So I know that St. Joe has left a positive impact on everybody's life that was there, but I know now that we're better because of it. We're stronger because of it, and
Mhm.
I don't think we could we could dissect it any more than what we already have been doing.
Mhm.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
think just oh,
Good.
yeah, just echoing that, what Christine said, we are better because of our time there. I know for me, I look back and obviously the connections that we had with faculty and students, and I know for me, faith development was a huge aspect with
Hmm.
retreats and other things through campus ministry and the wonderful religious brothers we had on campus. But to students who might be going through the time, as cliche as it sounds, it really does get better, and you just have to go through it. Again, I know it's a cliche, but I just remember those couple months really are such a blur. But we got through it, we got stronger, and again, I think we learned a lot from the experience.
Awesome. Awesome. So that leads me to my last question. That perfectly leads me to my last question. What lessons can you share with others who may find themselves in this position? They're in school, everything is going to what they think is good, is okay, and then all of a sudden they find out that the college they're in is going to shut down, is going to close. What lessons can you share with them?
The feelings that they have right now are temporary. There's so much life ahead of these students. I know, speaking from my experience, I grew up really quickly after graduating, just moving out right away to a completely different state, 500 plus miles away, not ever being in South Dakota before. I knew nothing coming here. And I've just had so many life experiences, whether it's personally or professionally, that I've gone through where kind of it's the memories of the shock and just all the events leading up to it are fading for me. And I think that's just because I've grown up and I've moved on. And I think when you are in a good place in your life where you're happy, you love what you do, and you look back on the fond memories of what college was for you, whether it's because it closed or because you've moved on, it happened for a reason. So the feelings are temporary, but again, so much life ahead and so many experiences to look forward to.
That is great, Nathan.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And, I guess I would add, just reiterating the fact that, and again, like perhaps I'm looking at it from a point of privilege since I'm through it. And again, the cliche things get better through it. But don't let your time doing the closure and the subsequent weeks and months be the defining memory of your experience at that institution. You picked there for a reason. Hopefully you had wonderful experiences when you were there. That's what you'll look back on. I remember about a year ago, I went back for a homecoming with a friend of mine on campus. We were able to hang out with her brother, who is an alum of the school, and his significant other. And again, it was just such a good experience where, yes, objectively, it was not fun transferring. It wasn't. But again, you just have such good memories from it. So just try to always reflect back to that and don't burn any bridges at that time.
That is an excellent message to end on. I appreciate the generosity of your time. Nathan Stroop, Christine Dillman, thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing your stories. And I really feel that what you shared with us today, listeners will really learn from. Thank you again for doing this. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Did you buy your tickets yet? Higher Education's first podcast conference is coming July 12th. Go to higheredpodcon.com, higheredpodcon.com. Get your tickets. Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.